Today we're talking about unit multipliers. You talked about this, or no, course 2 was just talking about this. I should have had us do this all together, but I wasn't planning ahead it enough. So this should be pretty much a review, and you might have just heard it on Thursday, I think, with course 2. A unit multiplier is just this. We're multiplying something by 1. Except for instead of calling it 1, we're calling it like 2 halves, or maybe 4 fourths, or something like that. And then we're doing one more thing with it. We're talking about it in terms of some kind of, with some kind of label. So for example, 2 feet over 2 feet. It's still equal to 1, isn't it? And then we're going to change one of them. We're going to say, well, instead of calling it 2 feet, it's still going to be 2 feet, but we're going to call it 24 inches. Right? So 2 feet and 24 inches are the same thing. So it's still equal to 1. Does that make sense? That's what a unit multiplier is. Actually, this one's not quite a unit multiplier because unit multipliers have the number 1 in them. So even though this is worth 1, my unit multiplier similar to that would be 1 foot over 12 inches. Can you think about why I might use a unit multiplier? Why would I multiply something by 1? Because 17 times 1 is still 17. 134 times 1 is still 134. But I'm changing the way 1 looks. Why would I do that? Yeah.
Translate it into
Other units. Yeah. If I'm trying to say, well, I've got 67 feet. How many inches is that? I'm going to use a unit multiplier to multiply by 1 because I don't want to change the value, the distance of it, but it is going to change the units that I'm using to calculate that distance. Okay. So as an example, on your piece of paper, I'll do the first one for you, and then you can do the second one on your own. Write 2 unit multipliers that are related. Well, since I'm comparing days and hours, my unit multiplier is always in the term of a fraction. And so I could either write my 1 day up in the numerator over 24 hours in the denominator. That's worth 1, right? Because they're the same amount of time. Or the other way I could write is to flip-flop them. And I'd say, well, write my 1 day down here and 24 hours up here. Make sense? And we'll talk in a little bit as a review again, why might I want to use this one, or why might I want to use this one. Okay, do the same thing if I'm writing a unit multiplier using 16 ounces and 1 pint. Write it on your piece of paper, please, which you already got out. Right, Matthew? Right. Sorry, you got it already. Good. What do you have? You don't have to say it equals anything. It's just that's the unit multiplier. 16 ounces over 1 pint, that fraction. Or 1 pint over 16 ounces. Sure. Either one of those is a unit multiplier. Both of those are equal to 1. So when we multiply it by something, we're still just multiplying by 1. Okay, so here's where we would use this kind of stuff. A gallon is 128 ounces. Let's convert those ounces to pints. Well, you just said 16 ounces is in 1 pint, or 1 pint is in 16 ounces, right? So we're going to use one of those 2 unit multipliers that you just came up with. We're going to take our original value, 128 ounces, and if I were you, I would get in the habit of making it into a fraction by just putting it over 1. Because then we can think about just multiplying fractions, and I think it becomes a little bit easier that way. Okay, so I am going to multiply this by either this unit multiplier or this unit multiplier. Okay? And what we're trying to do is to multiply by one of those things so that we get an answer that's listed in pints, not ounces anymore. Okay? So which one of these should I choose? Have any ideas? Yeah.
I think you should choose pints over ounces.
Why? Pints over ounces, this guy?
Because I feel not exactly sure, but I feel like multiplying the 128 ounces by 1 pint, since yeah,
You picked the right one. Your reasoning wasn't quite right, but you did pick the right one. That's the one we're gonna use. The reason we wanna use that one is because if I'm trying to change away from ounces and I want this to get canceled out, it's in the numerator here. I need something that's the same in the denominator to cancel out. Because ounces over ounces is just one. We can get rid of it, right? That wouldn't have happened if I had it here. I would have been multiplying ounces times ounces, and I would have gotten ounces squared, which doesn't really make sense. Okay? So now I can just multiply across. 128 times 1 is 128. Oh, and my label is pints. All right, 1 times 16 is just 16. I can get, sorry, shouldn't have left that out there. So 128 divided by 16, and my label is pints. What is that? 60, I believe that's 8, isn't it? Can you calculate that quick? 128 divided by 16? I'm gonna write it down, you can tell me if it's wrong. But I believe we're at 8 pints. So give me a thumbs up once you get it. Matthew's is saying yes. I've calculated that correctly. Alright, so here's another one very similar to this. We're converting inches, something in inches into centimeters, okay? And they tell you right off the bat something you may or may not already know, that in 1 inch, that's about 2.54 centimeters, okay? So the two possible unit multipliers, if I'm gonna convert from inches to centimeters or centimeters to inches, I could say 1 inch is the same as 2.54 centimeters, which kind of looks, I'm hoping that looks weird. We don't like to have decimals in a fraction, but for the sake of the unit multiplier, you could. Okay? Or the other thing that we could do is say 2.54 centimeters is the same as 1 inch. Therefore, that's also a unit multiplier equal to 1. Okay? So now, a bookcase that is 50 inches high is how many centimeters? Okay, so I'm saying, well, let's take 50 inches, and we're going to multiply it by one of these unit multipliers. And again, I would suggest doing this, put it in terms of a fraction so that you see that numerator denominator. If you haven't written this down, go ahead and write that down. And again, I'll ask you which one of those unit multipliers should we use? Lauren, what do you think? And a reminder, I'm trying to get rid of inches, right?
2.54 over 1.
Agreed. Okay, because once again, I'm looking for something that cancels out the inches. I've already got them in the numerator, so my inches needs to be in the denominator of my unit multiplier. Now it's just a matter of multiplying across. 50 times 2.54. Yeah?
isn't it 127 centimeters?
127. That looks about right. 1 times 1 is 1, so I don't really even need the 1 there, but 50-inch tall bookshelf is the same as 127 centimeter tall bookshelf. We good? What questions do you have so far? Yeah.
So, since inches is in the numerator in the first one, it has to be in the denominator in the second.
Correct, because that's the only way they're going to cancel out. And here's what would have happened, by the way, if I would have done this. Inches times inches would have been inches squared. They wouldn't have canceled out, they would have been multiplied by each other. But I'm trying to get rid of them to convert it into centimeters. Okay? Alright, I'd like to have you guys try this on your own. Maybe I'll start by saying if I'm going from quarts to gallons, what are the two possible unit multipliers I could have? How many quarts are in a gallon? It's quart, man. Quarter. How many? 4. So what are my two unit multipliers? What's one thing that I could have? Sorry. I think you had it. Say it louder.
4 pints over
I'm not dealing with pints here. I'm doing quarts and I'm doing gallons.
I messed up. 4 quarts over
4 quarts over 1 gallon. 24 quarts in a gallon, so these are the same, that's equal to 1, that's a unit multiplier, or, flip it around, right? I could also use, 1 gallon over 4 quarts. Okay, with that in mind, let's start with 24 quarts. You write that out first, I'd put it over 1 if I were you, and then choose one of those unit multipliers, see what you get. 24 quarts is the same as how many gallons? Well, list out we're starting with 24 quarts, that should be the first thing, your given value that you're starting with. That's how you should be starting, 24 quarts, again, I'd put it over 1 times something. Matthew, what do you got?
6 gallons.
Okay, going a step further, you're not there yet. This is the unit multiplier you should have chosen. 24 quarts times the unit multiplier 1 gallon over 4 quarts. So that your quarts cancel out. Looks like I'm gonna have 14 gallons over 24 divided by 4, which is 6. Ooh, 6 gallons. Now, did you look at that and say, well, isn't that easier to just kind of think about, I've got 24 things, I'm gonna put them into groups of 4? Like, isn't that kind of like a division problem, right? 24 divided by 4 gets me down to 6. And that's really what we're doing here. But when you start dealing with much, much larger quantities, it becomes tougher, and this might be easier. The other thing is sometimes we use multiple conversion factors, multiple unit multipliers. For example, I could go from inches to feet, feet to yards, and now yards to mile or something like that, and we're actually going to be multiplying by a couple of those. That gets a little complex then, so we still need to know what we're doing here. All right, Carter claims he can run 10,000 centimeters in 14 seconds. That sounds pretty tough.
Yeah, all I need is 4 seconds. I can run 10,000 centimeters. Beat that.
I don't know if I like Carter. Seems a little arrogant. The question is, we don't usually do things in terms of centimeters for running distances. So what could we potentially change this into? That's my starting amount, right? 10,000 centimeters, so that's my given value. I'm going to be starting with that and multiplying it by some unit multiplier. What do we want to change that into? Ideas? Yeah.
Meters.
Meters? Okay. So if that's the case, what unit multiplier am I going to multiply this by here? Something over something. How many centimeters are in a meter, Matthew?
1,000.
Nope. 100. 100 centimeters are in 1 meter.
Mix it up with milliliters, yeah.
What's that?
Mix it up with milliliters.
Yeah. There would have been 1,000 millimeters, you're right. Okay, so we could do this. Okay, when we do that, my centimeters and centimeters get canceled out. I'm going to be left with just meters. And then I should end up with, 10,000 divided by 100 is going to give me 100 meters. Okay, so we got 100 meters per 14 seconds. And again, does that sound right? 14 seconds, 100 meters. Maybe. I think typically we'd put